So it's rather a big group to invite feedback from your breakout groups. So I apologize, we're not going to do that. But I'm hoping that you had a useful discussion. And what I'm going to do now is just talk a little bit, developing on the question, is there any cause in nature that makes these hard hearts? So there's this term hegemony, or hegemony, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, which is about the way that culture spreads. And it works for negative cultures, but it also works for positive cultures. People are influenced by the behavior of other people, the attitudes of other people, and gradually whole cultures can change. We've seen many changes in our time. In my lifetime, I've certainly seen many cultural changes, some of them for the better, actually. So I don't think everything gets worse all the time. There's also the chance to improve certain things. Think about what affects your heart. Think about your own history. Since you were very, very small, a major influence is your family. You learn so many attitudes within your family towards other people, towards the world, the way that you treat other people. A lot of it comes from your family. And of course, many of us rebel against our family. So it's not that the family has total control of us. We are free to go against the norms of our family if we think that they're wrong or don't like them. And then in terms of our general culture, our education is quite important, but also our friendship groups as we grow up, very important, very influential. And the media. If I think back to my own childhood, especially my teenage years, I was so influenced by things like the words of songs, things like that, or movies that you saw, or so many things influence you. And these are formative years. Many attitudes are developed when you're young, and you can change them later. But you have to be quite strong, and it can take many years to change. So if we want to understand the causes of hard hearts, psychology and sociology are quite useful to an extent. They do explain to some extent what causes the attitude in individuals and in societies, in groups. But when it comes to Buddhadharma, the tradition taught by the Buddha, first of all, we're encouraged to look within for the causes. So often with psychological explanations, it's really about, your mum and your dad and some things like from the outside usually. And certainly in sociology, it's similar. It's the impact of your culture, the media and so forth. But with Buddhadharma, the way to understand the source of the hard heart or the open, compassionate heart is by looking within yourself. This is very important. It's called inner work. In fact, when we talk about Buddhadharma, we can call it inner work. It's a process of inner transformation. And it rests on the understanding that each one of us has the potential for total purity of heart and mind. Total purity in the sense of wisdom and compassion. Total clarity. Even the hardest heart has that potential. So this is very, very positive, optimistic in terms of the potential. But in terms of the inner work required, it's very challenging. It's not at all easy. So in terms of what the topic this evening, seeing through and beyond the barbarian Dharma, what I'm saying is that we have to start within us. And we have to start by acknowledging and recognizing our inner barbarian. This is incredibly difficult in my experience. I was on retreat in southern Spain in 2007 and 8. And I started to recognize a potential in me for terrible cruelty to beings much weaker and smaller and more vulnerable than myself. And I was very disturbed by this. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that I could have such thoughts. And then I started to remember early childhood, some cruel things that I did, for instance, to insects, but also to other children at my school. And I had to recognize that I have cruelty within me. Cruelty that I personally reject. I don't believe in it. I don't want to be like that. But somehow I have the potential to be like that. And it was very, very disturbing. It was like shattering of my self-image as being a good person. And it was upsetting. And when I thought about karma, which is to do with what would be the results in a future life, I thought, well, if I was born in a country like Nazi Germany, I would join them because I have that potential within me. And that was a very shocking thought, because that's something which, of course, my belief system I totally reject. Gradually, I came to see that actually within me there's a spectrum, because at the other end of the spectrum, I have the potential to be a Buddha. So I have the potential to be a Buddha at one end and the most terrible barbarian at the other end. And actually, it's been very helpful to me to recognize that about myself, even though it was painful and difficult. Because it means I am responsible. I'm responsible, and I can make choices. Of course, these emotions which are connected to all these things are very powerful, but still, the one place that we can have some jurisdiction is our own mind. So, recognizing I have potential for cruelty, for oppression, I have the potential for desire for power over others. Materialistic beliefs. It means to believe that everything is about the material world. Because the barbarian Dharma is very materialistic. It believes that territory, ownership, possession is the key to happiness, and that the mind is just a byproduct of the biology. In fact, this is built into the sort of modern science of materialism. And so it's kind of infects our whole global culture. So each of us has the opportunity to transform our closed, hard heart into an open, warm heart, to go beyond selfishness and develop the attitude of universal responsibility, of unconditional, universal love and compassion, universal in the sense for all other beings. We have that potential. And we can move beyond materialism to spirituality. I mean, probably most of us are a mixture of the two. At one end of the spectrum, there is the belief that everything is material, that the mind is just a byproduct of the brain, for instance. And at the other end of the spectrum is an understanding that the mind is primary, the mind is the most powerful, and that the material world is a kind of byproduct of the minds of the inhabitants of that world. Grasping at self and other as totally separate. This is something we've all been brought up to do, to think like that. In the 20th century, a highly individualistic culture was evolved and spread throughout the world, where everybody is separate from everybody else. So community broke down. The sense of collective responsibility broke down. This is completely false. We're all interdependent. We do not have a self that is independent. We depend on others for every single thing that we have, everything that we need, everything we want, everything that brings us even the smallest happiness comes from others. So it's a big task to reverse the conditioning that we all have from our culture. And this program of 6 sessions is going to explore this kind of question from a number of different angles. And it's linked to the Kalachakra Tantra, which is a very highly developed system within the Buddhadharma, and has some very important special features. And I'll do my best to make this meaningful and useful for living in these times. That's my purpose. So I want to invite you for the next 10 minutes or so, if you wish, to ask any questions. And I think there are 3 different pages of what do you call it? Video screens of individuals. So if you want to ask a question, just stick your finger up and I'll say your name and invite you, and you'll unmute yourself and ask the question. And Sigal, you're the first one I noticed. So would you like to unmute yourself? I'll unmute you. Yeah, you're unmuted.
Hi, Andy. Yeah. Thank you so much. You just said the material world is byproduct of the mind, or the opposite? And before that, you said the mind is byproduct. Could you explain this?
Okay. Well, I used to have a lot of debates with my father. My father was a scientist by background, and he believed that the mind was a byproduct of the brain, and that it was impossible for there to be consciousness that had any kind of power independent of the brain and the nervous system. And because I was going deeper and deeper into studies in Buddhadharma, it was becoming clear to me that from the Buddhist perspective, it's the opposite, that the mind is primary,
right,
and that the material sort of appearances that we experience actually track back to the mind, because some things are karmic. We're in situations, but that karma came from the mind originally. And this is very strong in the Kalachakra Tantra, actually, that everything depends on the consciousness and creating the causes. Right. So I'm not saying one or other is right. I'm just presenting that there are these 2 views. That's all. Okay. And Smada, you want to ask a question? Unmute yourself. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, talk about the potential of compassion and love and the potential of barbarity and hate. Is it a potential or is it something else?
What do you think?
The word together between potential and barbarity, I find it difficult to talk together. I feel it's something different, some kind of force, but not a potential.
So when we use the word potential in context of Buddhist understanding, potentials are like karmic imprints or seeds. And so some of those karmic imprints or seeds coming from previous lives cause us to behave in certain ways because that was something we did in previous lives. So if you look at world history, the chances are that at some time in the past, in previous lives, one was part of a barbarian culture. There's been so many in human history, it's almost impossible to say we weren't. And therefore, we probably, most of us, have the potential to repeat that, like an instinct. We don't think about it, it just comes out. We could just say like what I just said. And so therefore, we can use the word potential. It doesn't mean it's our deepest potential, but nevertheless, it is a potential. And then we have to choose whether to follow it or not. And sometimes some of these potentials are very hard to resist because they're very powerful. Okay, somebody else? Just keep, Mary, yes, please unmute yourself. Oh, I can unmute you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much. Can we have any kind of optional homework, please? Like any meditation that you suggest for until the next session or something like that.
Well, the meditation that we did at the beginning, where you connect through this magical net, is very powerful, and it will actually have a profound effect on your inner barbarian. Because the more you connect the node of bright light in your own heart center with the node of bright light in everybody else's heart center, including the people you don't like, the harder it is to want to be cruel to them or to harm them. And the more that you're likely to melt that, and it does open your heart. So, you know, maybe if you've got time, it might be useful to do that meditation.
10 minutes, like, would be good?
Yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, it's up to you, whatever time you have.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you can do it even when you're not on the cushion. You can just do it walking around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Somebody else? Yes, Diana.
It's not my question, it's a question from Aliona. What can we do in a moment of spiritual kind of desperation, spiritual emptiness, and how Buddhadharma can help us?
I think in this case, the word emptiness is being used in a negative sense,
yes,
like a desert, like a spiritual desert, where there's no vitality or energy.
No vitality.
Okay, so some of us actually exist or live in cultures where that is quite normal. And that is a very sad situation, but it's our karma that brought us there. But the fact that the person who asked this question is in this gathering here shows that they're actually looking for something else, something different from this sort of dead feeling. And really the answer is in the heart, not the brain, I think. I think that really it's quite simple, which is we need to open our heart to others. And this is a slow process, and sometimes it's scary. Maybe we've been hurt a lot in the past. This is a reason why we close our hearts. So we can begin with people that we feel we trust. This is actually where the spiritual teacher, or thinking about the Buddha actually, is quite positive. And in meditation, you can open your heart because it's a safe space. You can train yourself to open your heart in meditation. And actually, you will start to see changes in your relationships with others. And your heart will begin to feel warmer. I think that's the way forward in general. Okay. Maybe one more question. Time is passing quickly. Anybody else? Maybe I go to another screen. I can't see. Most of the people don't have the video. I think they're in Russia. Okay. No more question? Okay. Yeah, enough. Yeah. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
I was thinking that maybe living in an aggressive society, there's no such thing as a completely aggressive society, but the vibe of aggressiveness can make us shut down a little bit as individuals to feel like we can survive. Yes. We need to in order to continue to function. So how do you keep an open heart without getting you get the idea.
I understand. I understand the question. And I know where you're coming from. And I really sympathize. And in your case, you make music. And through your music, which I've heard some, you communicate the most beautiful, positive, warm-hearted feelings. And this not only nourishes the people who listen, but I'm sure it nourishes you. And this is how great art comes. It often comes in situations of adversity. because the person who needs to express these positive things is going against the cultural background. So it's true, you have to protect yourself. But if you close your heart, you lose compassion. You lose love. And this is really not helpful. As we get gradually more capable, we can open our heart even in the most difficult situations. It doesn't mean it's not painful. It will be painful. But this pain of compassion for those who are suffering around us, which is really what it is, actually nourishes us. His Holiness Dalai Lama has said, at first compassion is painful, and then it brings you a lot of joy. And somehow we need to learn to transcend our situation, however dark and difficult it might be. You know, just being in a group like this, right now, you're connecting with others who feel the same as you, right? That is one important thing about these groups, what we call Sangha in Buddhism. Yeah, it is difficult enough. I do understand. It is difficult. I also found it difficult all my life. And right now I'm actually living in quite a gentle situation in a quiet village where people aren't aggressive. Somehow I must have created some good causes. But when I was younger, sure, so much brutality around me, so much. So somehow using whatever means, and in your case, it's your music, I think. But maybe you have some other medium as well. Whatever media we have to nurture and nourish our good heart, that is how we will survive these difficulties. And eventually, we can participate in a positive cultural transformation that will bring about the kind of world we want to live in. But, you know, this may be way in the future, I don't know. But as the Dalai Lama says, never give up. Yeah, that's the best I can offer. Never give up. So we're going to finish with a short meditation now. Bring your mind to your heart in the center of your body on this seat. Your heart is like a flower. At night, the flowers close because there's no light, no sunshine. And then when the sun rises, they start to open. Feel the sun rising in your being. And allow the heart to open. What is love? It's wanting others to be happy. Wanting them to find peace and satisfaction. What is compassion? It's wanting to free others from suffering and pain and difficulty. The flower of your heart is a flower of love and compassion. You can take care of this flower like a gardener. You can give it water, nourishment, and bring the sunshine from positive sources to your flower. Feel responsible for your heart. In the same way that a mother is responsible for her baby. Determine, I will take good care of my heart, for myself and for others. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for being here and sharing and participating. We'll meet again at the same time next week. I think it's the same Zoom link, is that correct? Maybe, yeah, Tal is nodding, so then it's the same. So use the same method to get in. And next week, we'll be looking at another challenging subject, the process of societal collapse and how to respond positively. So today we look back at the past quite a lot. Now we're going to be looking at the present and the probably near future. So again, it's going to be challenging, but I will do my very best to keep it positive because it's really important for all of us. So anyway, thank you very much for being here.